This is the slowest start to the spring housing market since this time in 2009. But here's what's wild. Prices are still high, interest rates are still high, but people are still buying. So who are these people and what do they know that you don't? But first, my name is Tiffany. I'm a loan officer here in Las Vegas, Nevada. I've helped over 200 families with their real estate needs and would love to help you with yours. This includes things such as a refinance, maybe buying a property, taking out some equity, whatever your needs may be, I can help you with those. So I'm going to leave my information in the description below so we can connect and see how I can best serve you. As well, this is a growing channel and I greatly appreciate everyone who's been subscribing, liking the content, maybe sharing it. So greatly appreciate everyone who's been doing that. So if you have not already, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already and if you like what you see. But now let's get into today's video. So it's very easy to say, the spring market's in a slump, the real estate market's in a slump, but what do the numbers actually tell us here? And the truth is that the numbers pretty much paint that same picture. In fact, the spring market started with the lowest numbers recorded month to month since April of 2009, meaning, each month we take a look at where people are at buying homes and where they compare to last year at the same time. From April of 2024 to April to 2025, what do the numbers look like? And that is where we're seeing some concern because we actually dipped from last year when we actually expected a gain. Most economists expected that we were going to be up. Mind you, there is a lot of people who are depending on basically that number going up to show that the economy is strong, people are wanting to buy houses, and to make the case that, we are doing fine as an economy and that there's no economic troubles up ahead, which is maybe not the case. But anyways, the April report showed that April home sales dropped to the slowest pace for that month since April of 2009, which we all know what happened right before that. That was when the Great Recession happened and the big mortgage boom happened and there was all this turmoil and chaos and all of these things. So if that is the worst point that we've been at for a long time with the April market, how bad is it that we're now at the second worst April pretty much since then? People are basically showing concern that, is the real estate market broken? What's going on here? Because if sales dropped, what else is going on here that could paint the picture of what's really happening with people and their confidence in real estate as a whole. And the numbers show us that there is a lot of people who are scared to move forward. In fact, one of the big things that I hear from people when they're interested in buying a home is that there's not a lot of homes for sale. At least that was the case, a few months ago. There's just not a lot of good options for us to pick. And while that still is the case with people who have, like the lower interest rates and stuff like that, what's interesting here is that inventory actually jumped, month to month. So inventory jumped 9% month to month and was nearly 21% higher than April of last year. There were 1.45 million homes for sale at the end of April, which at the current sales pace represents a 4.4 month supply. That is the highest level in 5 years. So people have more options and yet they're still not pulling the trigger. And what's even scarier is that we also took a look at where cancellations were at. So let's just say you happen to be in the market, you're working with a realtor and you go under contract. We're seeing that number of people who decided to back out actually increase as well. Cancellation rates, or how many people cancel their contracts, are also rising, hitting 7% of sales in April. That is up from a recent average of about 3 to 4%. So that's almost double the normal cancellation rate. So the numbers here are telling us that people are scared. If you look at cancellations, most likely people get into contract because they want to buy a home and then they get scared because they're like, oh crap, this is way more than I thought if I was renting, or I'm going to have to do this to it, or I actually really like the payment I'm at now, and now my payment is going to be way more than I anticipated. The numbers don't lie here, and they're painting the picture that people are very scared right now, and they don't have confidence in the real estate market as a whole. So let's talk about a few different reasons why people are not buying. Even though inventory looks good and we seem to be moving in a better direction economy-wise, why aren't people taking that plunge? And I think it kind of boils down to a few different reasons. Number one, I think interest rates are still a hot topic for a lot of people, and people are very concerned with what's going to happen to them in the future. It's a conversation I'm having a lot. It's a conversation I'm having with a few of my peers who are also in the industry. There is just this concept that people have that interest rates are going to be very different by the end of the year. And while this may be true, based on history of what we've been seeing for the last few years, I don't think it's going to be super low come December of this year. But that is still the expectation that a lot of people have. And, I don't even think it's a luxury thing, like they want it to be lower. I think a lot of people need it to be lower. In fact, Bill Pulte, who is the director of the FHFA, basically came out and told his support basically for Donald Trump's plan to help bring down interest rates, and was talking to Jerome Powell specifically about how if he would just give a little give in interest rates, there would be so much demand for people, and the real estate market would really benefit from having this pent-up demand basically being released. And they know that interest rates are the biggest factor right now for people, because let's just say you bought a $400,000 home in 2020. That payment that you're making on that home versus a $400,000 home now is completely different. And in some cases, it's more than double. Interest rates are the factor here that I think most people are waiting for in order to basically make that leap and to make that jump into deciding to buy versus live in this smaller house that they've had forever. Maybe they've decided to stop renting and they want to buy a home now. Or maybe they want to move from a bigger house to a smaller house, but they're going to pay almost exactly the same in a mortgage for the two. So they know that interest rates are the missing piece here, and that's the biggest piece that makes people feel wary of taking that plunge. But another factor here is that despite the fact that interest rates are high, inventory and their pricing really hasn't changed at all. The average price of a home sold in April of this year was $414,000, which is only an increase of 1.8%, but still an increase year over year, seeing as though we were down home sales year over year. Even though people aren't buying as much, there's still pretty much like this guard, this gate that people that are selling homes really can't afford to take less or don't want to take less than what they paid for the home. So, even though there is still pent up demand and people want to buy homes, they just are likely being priced out of being able to buy a home because interest rates are high and prices are not giving on these homes. So those are the two main factors that I think are playing, into people's minds into whether or not they decide to buy now versus buy later. But I think the big overarching theme here that I think is playing a big factor as well into this is I think people are very uncertain about the economy. In fact, consumer confidence is at an all-time low. There's still a lot of talk about tariffs. In fact, as I'm filming this, there's talk about the tariffs not even being legal, Trump's appealing. There's just a lot of back and forth that's happening that I think is making people skeptical and fearful of what's to come in the economy. There's a lot of people who are already saying we're in a recession. There's recession indicators. If you're talking on TikTok or Instagram, there's people who are like, oh, these are cute little ways to know we're in a recession. But I think a lot of people remember a recession from 2008 and remember the struggles that our parents went through, or if you were old enough to go through that yourself, you remember what that looked like. So I think a lot of people are kind of preparing for this doomsday to happen where the bomb finally drops and everyone finally acknowledges that we're in a recession. So I think there's a lot of back and forth here. And I think while the interest rate and the pricing is the biggest factor as to why people are not buying, I do think that there's a factor in this in that people are scared and they're not sure what's going to happen with the economy. They're not sure if they should be saving their money, if they should be trying to find the cheapest option possible, maybe moving in with roommates, maybe moving back in with their parents, trying to basically offload their expenses in order to prepare for the economy that is set to come. I think all of those are basically playing a factor, which is why I think you're seeing cancellations high, even though we're starting to get inventory back in the market. Honestly, the fact that interest rates aren't really moving is the biggest indication that there's a lot of turmoil happening here, that people are just not sure what's going to happen. And even just the thought in their mind that, interest rates could be different at the end of the year is enough to cause someone to be like, oh, well, I don't want to take action now if it's going to be different come a few months from now. So, I think all of these are playing a factor into why people are not buying. But with that being said, that is kind of deepening the problem with the economy, that things are not looking as good as they should be or could be because people are not making this big decision that usually happens around this time, especially because spring market is typically the market that people start making changes in their lifestyles if they're going to make changes in, this time. So with that being said, that may seem like, no one's buying houses at all. But the truth is that there are still people who are buying. And depending on what your circumstances are, it might make sense for you to take that plunge even now when things are very uncertain. And so I'm going to go into a few different personalities that are buying homes now. And if these are you, you might want to consider making that plunge sooner rather than later. First is investors, which I know is a hot topic here. I know a lot of people have a lot of feelings about investors, but the truth is that investors are likely taking advantage of the fact that this market's very uncertain and they can likely get better deals on homes because there's not as many people who are in the market actively buying. Now, with that being said, I still seeing a lot of sellers who are wanting certain prices just because likely they have to have a certain price or they want a certain price in order to make a move to another, property. But cash investors and just investors in general are basically more apt to take risk in the first place. Usually they have a personality type that's more interested in taking risk. So these people are going into the market and trying to find properties that are maybe distressed or maybe that are sitting on market for longer, that are, not getting the action that maybe the realtor or the seller would like. And so they're able to go get these deals because they have the money on hand or they're using a hard money lender who doesn't use the terms that are standard in the market, basically. They can go find these alternative sources of lending and then they're able to buy these homes at such a discount that they're able to make quick adjustments and then they can either keep it as a rental property or they can go and try and sell it on the market themselves. So that is definitely someone who is benefiting at this time from the market being a little bit slower and people being a little scared to take action. It's always the people who decide to take action that end up being rewarded in the end. And so we're seeing that with investors right now who are getting really great deals on properties because they're willing to just take the risk. Second is high income earners, which doesn't seem like a shock at all, but likely these high income earners are not really as concerned with, rates and, all these things. And they're just looking to basically put their money to work. So they would rather buy real estate or maybe put their money into the stock market or just try to find a way to make use of their money. These high income earners that are just looking for a home, maybe they've been renting and now they're still interested in buying, basically, there's still a need for them in order to get into a home. And this is actually a really great time to get into luxury. From what I'm seeing based in the Las Vegas market, there is more homes on market for longer times, especially in that luxury market. If that was something that people were interested in the first place, it's a great time to take advantage of the market being a little bit slower and getting a great deal on these luxury properties that these high income earners probably interested in looking at in the first place. Next are people who are relocating. So like I mentioned, this economy is basically forcing people to make some decisions about their living arrangements. So if you're in an area that is a very high priced area, like let's just say you're in California, you're in Hawaii, you're in one of these areas that is very expensive to own property, it might make sense for you to take whatever equity you have in that property, get rid of that debt and go find someone who is interested in taking that on. And then you take whatever you have and you're going to go to a lower cost state. And we're seeing this a lot in the Las Vegas market. In fact, a lot of my clients that I'm talking to are moving from areas like California, Arizona, Utah, all of these things, and they're interested in basically reducing the amount that they're spending on taxes. And since Nevada is a no income tax state, it's very advantageous for people to decide to leave these areas that are higher tax areas and move to an area where they can take advantage of the tax code here. As well, cost of living, just, properties that you can get here versus what you can buy in California for that same price point. I am seeing a lot of that happen in this market. So someone who's used to $1 million house getting them like a 2-bedroom, 2-bath can get a really nice home here in Las Vegas for $1 million. I am seeing that a lot in this market where people are just moving from a very high priced area and now they're moving into an area that is more affordable and that makes sense as we get into a rough economy or into a recession. And then last but not least, people who are looking to take advantage of special programs that exist that may not always get the attention and love that it gets in a normal real estate market. And specifically what I'm talking about here is first-time home buyers, people who are using programs like down payment assistance or maybe some kind of grants in order to buy their home. In a normal, healthy real estate market, a lot of times these buyers get overlooked because they are using some funds outside of, maybe money that they have. Like if they're getting a grant or if they're taking advantage of a down payment assistance program. A lot of times sellers see these, buyers and they think they're not as qualified to buy. Like they see them as a risk basically. So sometimes in a healthy market, these buyers often get overlooked. But this market is actually working in their favor right now if you're interested in taking advantage of those programs, because there's not as many people who are in the market buying. So if you're a seller who really needs to sell their house, you're interested in taking an offer from anyone who could basically put in an offer and fulfill. And even though their loan type might be a little bit riskier, you're willing to take that chance because you just need to get out of the situation. People who are needing to use like down payment assistance, or if you're using local grants in your area, or maybe you have one from the job that you're working, this is actually a really good time for you to buy. Even though rates are higher and there is that, unexpected cost of going from renting to buying, if you are someone who is going to need these programs anyway in order to buy a home, and home ownership is something that you've been wanting, this is actually a really good time for you to take advantage of those because you don't have as much competition in the market that's competing against you. Those are the people who are best suited for buying right now. Especially again, if you're someone who's relocating or if you're using a down payment assistance program, this is actually a really good time for you to consider making a move, because again, you could probably refinance that home later down the line once you've been settled in and interest rates actually do go down. But for you to actually take advantage of the moment, I think it makes more sense for you to take that opportunity now. And then, as interest rates come down and as the economy settles down, then you have the opportunity to get yourself into an even better position down the line by refinancing, or maybe even trying to sell that house, get into another and taking that equity, all of these things. Like if you look at it as a game, then you're always looking to level up, then this is the best time to get in if you're in one of those positions where you're kind of at a disadvantage. So just to recap, basically the spring market is in a little bit of a slump, and it's because people are unsure right now with interest rates, with where inventory is at, with where the economy is at. No one really knows what's going on here, and that's causing a lot of fear in the marketplace. People are not jumping on opportunities as much as they had been just this time last year. What can people do in order to get people back into the market? I lay down who this market is actually a really good time for as far as jumping into the market, but even if you're not one of those people, I still think buying makes sense if you're playing this as a long game. If you're someone who's just trying to buy a home and see rapid equity growth like in 2020, this is not the market for you. That is like the GameStop of real estate investing. And I don't think we're going to see that anytime soon. I don't think we're going to have 3% rates probably ever again, truthfully, but we're definitely not going to have it in the nearby future. So while I think that there's some optimism about where the interest rates might be by the end of the year, I don't think we're going to be as low as I think most people think we will be. I think we'll probably be in the low 6 range, maybe mid 6 range. Seeing as though we're in the 7 range as I'm filming today, I just don't see a huge need for it to go down rapidly unless Donald Trump just pulls a total wild card, which is not out of character for him. But I think what we're seeing right now is a lot of pushback, which I'm going to talk about in a later video about Donald Trump and the policies that he's trying to enact in order to force rates down. We are starting to see a little bit of pushback from that. So I think that there is some room to go here as far as interest rates go. So I think 2025 is still going to be a rocky year with where interest rates are. But that doesn't mean it's a bad time to buy. So if you're someone who has been likely disadvantaged for a long time, or maybe you would go put out offers, but you would get killed by offers that were over ask price, no appraisals, no contingencies, all of these things, this could be your market. And you, again, can refinance down the line, which I know is an easy opt-out of saying, and a lot of people are like, there's still a cost to that, which is true. There is still a cost to refinancing. But over the lifetime of the loan, you're going to be saving so much money if you just decide to refinance rather than hold yourself hostage to this higher interest rate that you decide to get if you decide to buy now. Mind you, it's not likely that prices are going to go down anytime soon. There's just not a need to. Lumber's getting more expensive, labor's getting more expensive, home builders have a lot more costs on their hands, so I don't think it's going to get any cheaper from here to build a home, at least for the foreseeable future. I do think that there's some developments here that might make home buying more affordable here within the next 5 years, but I don't think that's a tomorrow plan. So if you're someone who's trying to own real estate and trying to own it as an investment and trying to get in now, then it makes sense for you to take advantage of the market that you're in. And like I mentioned before with the real estate investors in the last part, there is rewards for taking risk. And so I think that if real estate is something that you are wanting to invest in and want to, basically put your chips into, and you're okay with playing the long game here, then I think it's a fine market to invest in. But if you are someone who's expecting to move anytime in the nearby future, or if you're someone who doesn't really stay put for very long, then, maybe buying right now doesn't make sense for you. There is always an advantage, even in times where it feels like a huge disadvantage. And so I think that if you are someone who's kind of on the fence about whether or not you should buy, talk to your local agent, talk to a loan officer. Again, I can help in pretty much every state other than a couple. So I'm going to leave, again, my info in the description below so we can chat if that is something that you're looking to do. But basically, talk to someone who's actually an expert in your market and talk to someone who knows about what's actually going on, because you may not even realize it, but this actually might be the best time for you in order to buy a home. That is it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please make sure to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!